I do not know how much more time I have to live my questions out, but I'm glad I started asking them, for although they cannot be rushed, these are questions that must not be avoided. The questions these charnel houses asked of me stir me to life-enriching responses. What are the things for which you'll be remembered? Cut the crap in your life. Do the things that matter. Find and exercise your gifts. Are you on a path of true humility? Submit to a truth that is bigger than yourself. Become part of it. Let it be your story. What I've been surprised to discover as these questions chase and wash over me is that preparing to live and preparing to die are in the end the same thing.
I learnt about the fact that this house was going to be the residence of the next Bishop of Worcester long before I knew that I was going to be Bishop of Worcester myself. And I received some information about the house when it was announced that I would be Bishop of Worcester, and I was delighted. I mean, it's a wonderful house in which to live. But the most fascinating thing about it was the charnel house. The charnel house priest was the priest who in medieval times was employed to say mass for the souls of the dead who were buried in the charnel house, the bone house, which is at the front of the house, underneath the terrace, underneath the front door. So we are surrounded by a lot of people in this house, a lot more dead than living. At the time, our children were 8 and 3, and we decided not to tell them about it because they thought it might be a bit spooky. But when we did eventually tell them about it some little while later, they said, oh yeah, we knew all about that. So we didn't need to keep it secret, but it was one of the most fascinating and intriguing things about it. And for me, but I think more so for Denise, who became fascinated by our companions who were with us all the time. Denise was just full of life, full of zest, full of enthusiasm, very beautiful, but also very beautiful inside, a most wonderful person. And so I suppose in God's scheme of things, it was inevitable that we would fall in love and be married. Her passions in life were God, and her family, and beauty, I think, of all sorts. I mean, she created this home in which we're sitting, and she had an eye for beauty, she had an eye for design. But the thing that really motivated her more than anything else in terms of her creative abilities was writing. She was an incredibly gifted writer. She had poetry in her soul, and of course the book, The Tour of Bones, is a meditation on life and death. And I think for both of us, the presence of the bones in the charnel house set us thinking about life and death, and the whole question of mortality and how we're here for a brief span.
Charnel houses belong to a world in which people maintained a relationship between the living and the dead, and it was commonplace in this world for people to offer prayers for the dead, and also sometimes for the dead to appear to the living. And this was recognised and incorporated in the teachings of the church. That connection between the living and the dead was broken by the Reformers. The Reformers said that once you are dead, there is no return from wherever it is that you go to. At the time of the charnel house, it was believed that men and women after death would spend time in a place called purgatory. Purgatory is what happened to spirits of those men and women who perished in this life before the general resurrection of the dead.
This is one of the very few remaining charnel houses in this country. I personally only know of one other. I grew up in East Kent, and there's a church in Hythe, St Leonard's, where the crypt is full of bones, all very neatly arranged. And I believe there's at least one other, but there would have been lots and lots, as indeed there still are on the continent. It was the Reformation which led to the destruction of charnel houses, and it's fascinating to look at what's still existing on the continent and compare it with what would have been here. And of course that's part of the journey that Denise made when she started reflecting on the book.
Well, here we are in this extraordinary space, and it's not just knee-deep, it's probably the height of a person, about my height, deep in bones. And they're scattered, not in any sort of discernible order, all over the place, skulls and other bones. On top here, there are bags of bones, most of which were removed from the chapter house when it was refloored, and they were taken away to Bristol to be analysed, and then they were brought back here and put in bags. And the idea was that they're here with those others that have been here. They might be from the same era, having been under the chapter house floor for a very long time. It did have a huge impact on Denise. It's the most remarkable thing about the house. So it really set her mind thinking, which eventually bore fruit in the book that she wrote, A Tour of Bones.
It's fascinating thinking about the sort of lives that the people whose remains are in the charnel house would have lived. It's likely to be people associated with the monastery, so it might be lay brothers, servants. It's not necessarily all monks, but we know a bit about medieval life. We know that it was hard. We know that for a lot of people it was short, and it was difficult. There was a lecture given about the bones which Denise attended, and the thing that sticks in my mind that she said about them was that several of the jaws were terribly misshapen because they'd been eaten away by abscesses, and that really brought home to me in a graphic and vivid way how difficult life was. I mean, none of us likes toothache now, and in those days a toothache caused by an abscess could have caused enormous damage, and might of course eventually have led to their death because of the poisoning that would have ensued.
Wow. I think this is a place that has been just left. That's the feeling I have in the scattering of these skulls and bones. What happened at the Reformation, what happened in the 1530s, what happened at the time that this place was abandoned, was the severance of the living from the dead. Because before then, the souls of the departed remained in contact with those left behind. They could receive the prayers of the living. I think their lives would have been shorter than ours. They would have been more fragile than ours. And they would perhaps have been closer to death than we are, because they knew that death could come at any time in a way that perhaps we no longer feel.
I often think at medieval churches that people would walk through the graveyard in the village and they would find there the graves of their family, and so that they would walk through the dead in order to worship every Sunday. And death was very much a part of life then, wasn't it, in a way that we've tried to banish it, really.
The contrast between our lives and theirs is what strikes me.
It's pretty stark.
It never occurred to me, I was 8 years older than Denise, it never occurred to me that she would die before me. And when she began to have some pain and discomfort, we had no idea what it was, and it took some little while for it to be diagnosed. And the prognosis wasn't good. She had a sarcoma, and some of the chemo she had to put up with was awful. I mean, it was so potent. It was the most powerful thing in the armoury of the medics. So during those last months, we had a really precious time. But the extraordinary thing is that she had written the book pretty much in its entirety, the Tour of Bones. And so that rendered the whole book, which is essentially a meditation through the lens of the charnel house, and a meditation on life. And she didn't like to use the word precious, she said, because that made it feel that it was something that had to be locked up, whereas it really made life more delicious.
I think Denise Inge conveys movingly the effect of confrontation with death. And she says that it's important for all of us to think about death, and to do so is not to prepare to die but to prepare to live. And that message, I think, is enormously valuable.
There's the famous song, isn't it? Je ne regrette rien. I don't regret anything. I don't suppose any of us will go to our deathbed regretting nothing. And frankly, I'd be rather worried about it if we didn't regret anything, because there will have been relationships which have been fractured in our lives. There will have been things that we haven't got right. But I think what I would say is that it's really helpful to everyone to live our lives in the light of death. And my hope is that Denise's book, Denise's witness to that, will help people engage with death in a way that makes them appreciate life.